Hello there, and welcome back to yet another unit builder video. Wow, I don't know about you guys, but November has seriously been killing it this month with all these insane banners. First, we had the Desert Mercenaries banner, which caught me by complete surprise. Me and anyone else who adores Sacred Stones were not ready for that insane banner. And then we get this crazy banner from Binding Blade, which yet again, none of us were expecting, because we all thought that with Book 3 having just ended, we would surely be getting far-fetched. Like, all of my friends on Discord and half of Reddit were eagerly awaiting for Jill and Nils and Shinen. I'm sorry if I butchered anybody's name, but you get the point! None of us were ready, and even though I haven't played Binding Blade yet, let me tell you, I was absolutely overwhelmed by all the juicy fodder this banner has to offer. I'm not gonna break the entire banner down for you guys, because ain't nobody got time for that, but I will point out that I'm incredibly interested in Percival, who comes with Rouse, Defense, and Resistance, and Igreen. Is that how you pronounce her name? Igreen? I don't know. But she has both Special Spiral and Pulse Smoke. Do you know that my legendary Ike has been waiting for Special Spiral since I got him in April? My next big summoning session video was going to be on the Desert Mercenaries banner, but now that this new monster of a banner has dropped, I have no choice. I have to dive into the cesspool that is the res summoning pool, and my orbs, oh my god, my orbs are not ready. So, my next video will likely be a summoning session, but for today, we are gonna slow down a little bit and focus on the potential demote of this banner. Echidna. I am really bad with these names. Alright, so we're just gonna get this show on the road. Echidna is the newest infantry axe unit to be added to FEH, and much like how I decided to focus on Tethys in my video from last week, the reason why I chose Echidna for this week's video is because she seems like the most obvious candidate for a demote. Let's pull up her stats and take a look, shall we? Alrighty, so at 5 stars and level 40, Echidna's neutral base stats read as HP 45, Attack 34, Speed 36, Defense 30, and Resistance 27. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I was actually a little surprised by her stats once those were finally confirmed. I actually thought that she was gonna be a bit tankier because of her weapons effect, which we'll get to in just a moment, but nevertheless, she's got some pretty decent stats. They're somewhat middling, at least if you were to compare her to Ross, who's got a little bit of extra attack and HP over her, but I generally don't like to compare units in my videos, nor will you see much of that moving forward. If you're watching my videos, I'm gonna assume one of two things. A, you're a new player and happen to summon an Echidna and need some tips on how to build her. Or B, you're like me, and you just happen to love a certain character and just want to create a fun, exciting, unique build for them to help them shine. So yeah, I'm assuming you're here because you like and chose to go with Echidna. Okay. Anyway, now that I've gotten off my soapbox, Echidna's stats are pretty sweet. She's definitely got some pretty solid resistance for an axe user, and it's worth mentioning that she actually has a super boon in resistance, which we'll make use of in a lot of our builds today. It's pretty neat, and it definitely helps set her apart from other axe users. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to her weapon, which, for me, was the thing that stood out to me most about her base kit. Echidna comes with the Rear Guard Plus, a new axe that provides +7 defense when the enemy initiates combat. Finally! It's about time we've gotten a defensive axe option. And if you were to refine it, it would grant an additional +4 defense, meaning that with this weapon alone, that increases her defense by 11 points. That is exceptional, and also why I assumed that she was going to be a bit tankier. Nevertheless, she's got a great base weapon that we'll be using in our builds today. For her special, Echidna comes with Soul. Soul is pretty handy, and it restores HP equal to 50% of the damage done. So, for example, if you were to attack the enemy and deal 20 damage, you would recover 10 HP on that attack alone. With a cooldown count of 3, it's a pretty nice special. I won't actually use it in any of my builds, but I'll explain why as we get to them. Now for her A slot, Echidna comes with Brazen Speed and Resistance 3. As someone who enjoys Brazen skills on my Linus and my Wolt, I can definitely vouch for how handy these skills are. The requirements are simple. If your character's HP falls below or equal to 80%, they get a boost of +7 speed and resistance, which can be very nice on units with middling defenses. I have to mention that Brazen Speed and Resistance is also a new skill, and quite possibly the last Brazen skill we were missing. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's nice that we finally get a new one. While it's not the first Brazen skill I typically go to, you'll find that I really embrace it in the budget build I've got ready for you guys. And lastly, in her C slot, Echidna comes with Drive Attack, which grants attack +3 to any allies within 2 spaces. It's definitely more consistent than a wave skill, for example, but you'll find that I generally don't like to spend time on skills that only grant +3 to any stat. I tend to prefer high risk, high reward skills instead, and so without having any additional effects, I'm not going to make use of this skill. Alright, and so that completes her base kit. Her stats are really solid, and with what she comes with out of the box, I have to admit that it was actually really easy for me to craft some builds for her. That being said, let's move on to build number 1, the enemy phase tank. So I thought of this build as soon as I saw Echidna in the banner debut video because, like I mentioned before, I thought her defenses were going to be a bit higher. Don't get me wrong, with this weapon and her current stats, she can definitely still tank and even more. But for now, let me share the defensive build I came up with for now. So this was directly inspired by my Silas, who I used on my main team in just about every mode. For this build, we are going to keep Echidna's base weapon and tack on a defense refine, which will grant her an additional +4 to her base defense. Because this weapon's effect is activated on the enemy phase, so too will the rest of her kit. For her assist, Reposition. It's consistent, reliable, and I use it to slingshot my units and allies around the map. For her special, I decided to run with Bonfire. Bonfire is a nice special that scales its damage off of Echidna's defense. With a cooldown count of 3, it doesn't take very long to charge, and assuming that Echidna's foe is able to outspeed and double her, she'll have Bonfire activated within the first round of combat in the enemy phase. For her A slot, I had to shoot for the moon and grant her Steady Stance 4. Steady Stance 4 is a crazy skill that grants her +8 defense on the enemy phase and additionally lowers the enemy's special cooldown charge by 1, making it harder for them to activate their specials. It's a monstrous buff and has a great effect to boot. Combined with her weapon, that's an increase of +19 defense on the enemy phase. Work! For her B slot, I threw in Quick Riposte. Quick Riposte is an enemy phase skill that grants her a guaranteed follow-up should her HP stay above 75%. It's most useful for units with low base speed, and though Echidna's base speed is actually quite modest at 36, I generally wouldn't consider a unit fast unless their speed was above 40. 42 preferably, mid to high 40s, and so I'm using this as a precaution, for now, while she's unmerged. For her C slot, I added in Joint Hone Defense. We're basically stacking buffs at this point, because with this skill, as long as Echidna is standing next to an ally, both her and that ally will get a boost of +5 added to their defense. Alright, and for her Sacred Seal, I decided to tack on Close Defense 3. This is a very reliable skill that grants her +6 defense and res, regardless of which phase we're on. The caveat is that it only applies to close range combat, so it doesn't activate when being attacked by ranged units. But with all these skills and buffs added together, Echidna should have no problem tanking through daggers or arrows. Just make sure to keep her away from magic. Much like with my Silas, this is a great build if you prefer to lure the enemy in and let them initiate combat. She takes her 2 steps forward, your allies follow closely behind, they attempt to attack her but fail to leave a scratch, and then both her and your allies can finish them off. Again, just make sure to be wary of magic users, because that defense won't help her against them. Alright, so that was it for build number 1. For build number 2, I want to switch gears and share with you guys the budget build I came up with. In editing my last video for Tethys, I realized that not a single one of the builds I came up with in that video were budget friendly, and so I made it a point to whip something up for any new players that are interested in really maximizing her damage output. So for build number 2, we're going to embrace her super boon in resistance and try to really capitalize on her mixed bulk. For her weapon, we're going to keep her native rear guard, but when refining it, I recommend going for a res refine, which will grant her an additional +4 to her resistance. Nice. For a special, I decided on going with Iceberg. Iceberg has a cooldown count of 3, which ain't bad, and what's nice about Iceberg is that unlike Bonfire, Iceberg scales off of Echidna's resistance, which we are definitely building up here. For her A skill, we're going to keep her native Brazen Speed and Resistance 3. Remember that in order for her to benefit from a Brazen skill, her HP has to fall below 80%. Throwing her into some melee combat should help get her there no problem. And once Brazen Speed and Resistance activates, both her speed and resistance are gonna jump up to the 40s, which is a very good place to be at, especially for tanking dragon attacks. For her B skill, I'm gonna give her Vantage. I'm sure many people are familiar with Vantage Brazen builds, but for those of you that aren't, let me tell you, Vantage is a very fun skill. As long as Echidna's HP falls below 75%, Echidna will attack first on any engagements in the enemy phase. This is incredibly fun because it grants Echidna the opportunity to wipe out her enemy before they can even land their first attack. And with the last two skills I've got, she'll be killing and tanking through foes quite easily. For her C skill, I decided to give her Attack Smoke. You can switch this out for Defense Smoke if you like, but I chose Attack Smoke because it's a very reliable debuff. After combat, the targeted enemy, as well as any other enemies within 2 tiles of Echidna, get a debuff of -7 attack. This is great because regardless of whether they use melee or magic attacks, it puts her in a better position defensively to tank through hits on the enemy phase. And lastly, for her Sacred Seal, I decided to go with another Brazen skill. I was really torn on whether to go with Attack Speed or Attack Defense, so I'll leave it up to you. I do have a slight preference for Attack Defense 3 because though we've built her resistance up quite considerably, I think her defense could still use the boost, and it'll really help turn her into more of a mixed tank once both Brazens activate. On the other hand, boosting her speed up could be very fun, especially if you plan for her to double the enemy a lot. Alright, so that was build number 2. I love Brazen skills, and I think that they synergize really well with Echidna's base stats, which look really middling at a glance, but can be bolstered up to some scary numbers with the help of this build. Definitely a really solid option for anyone on a budget. And lastly, we've got our last build, which is definitely not our budget-friendly build, but one that is equally as fun, if not more. For this build, we are once again going to make use of her native axe, Rearguard. What can I say? It's a really solid axe, and she welcomes any improvements to her defense. As far as the refine goes, I actually went with a plus attack refine. I don't often go for the attack refine, but I really liked seeing both her HP and attack at 50, so that was purely cathartic and aesthetic for me. If you'd prefer otherwise, I'd recommend a refine in defense or resistance, both of which will give her +4 to the respective stat. For her special, I'm gonna swap in Noontime. Noontime recovers HP equal to 30% of the damage dealt. Soul is a viable alternative that's already included in her base kit and heals 50% instead, but I'm gonna pick Noontime over Soul because of its lower cooldown. Feel free to take your pick. Now, as a centerpiece for this build, we have Distant Counter in the A slot. This entire build revolves around the idea that Echidna will be counterattacking any and all ranged units, and so moving forward, we want to really set her up defensively. For her B skill, we've got a few options. I ultimately landed on Null Sea Disrupt, which is an incredible skill that prevents any enemy units from preventing Echidna from counterattacking. This is one of those rare moments that I'll acknowledge that this skill has much greater value in both Aether Raids and Arena, but I'm tossing it in because I recognize its value. An equally as powerful alternative would be Special Spiral. The beloved Special Spiral. Special Spiral is a very special skill because assuming Echidna activates Noontime during battle, her cooldown count will go down by 2 immediately afterwards. This can become incredibly potent when you consider that Noontime only has a cooldown count of 2, meaning that Echidna will be able to activate Noontime through every engagement hereafter. It's such a crazy good skill, oh my god. And of course, like I mentioned earlier in this video, you can find Special Spiral on this exact same banner via Igreen. However you pronounce her name. Alright, we're almost done here. For her C slot, I decided to add in Rouse, Defense, and Resistance 3. So long as there aren't any allies directly beside Echidna, she will get +6 added to her defense and resistance at the start of every turn. This is especially good if you plan to perhaps use Reposition to slingshot her forward so that she can get away from her allies and engage onto the enemy. Good stuff, you know? And lastly, for her Sacred Seal, we've got Distant Defense 3. Since this build is designed around countering any and all ranged attacks, it's only fitting that we choose this seal, which offers her an in-combat boost of +6 to her defense and resistance when up against ranged units. I live for synergy, and I see so much potential in this build. Alright everyone, that was my last build for Echidna. The last thing I've got for you all is a side-by-side comparison of what her stats look like when fully merged. As you can see, her base speed can come up pretty high, so she can definitely be doubling some enemies later on. All in all, she's a great unit and will become even better should she be demoted into the regular summoning pool. I'm definitely happy for all the Binding Blade fans out there. An undoubtedly solid banner. Alright everyone, that is it. I hope you got something out of this video, even if just a chuckle. As I'm sure you can see, I gave Echidna a lot of enemy phase builds. I really like her weapon, and though I know a lot of people are comparing her to Libra and or giving her a woe gun axe, I really like rear guard, and I wanted to embrace it and its effect in each of her builds. As always, I've got a couple of fun mobile wallpapers to share with you guys in case any of you are die-hard Echidna fans. You can find the link to all of my mobile wallpapers in the link below. At the time I'm recording this, I don't know who our next focus unit will be, but I hope that by the time I upload this, I'm not playing catch-up and that another new banner has already dropped. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please feel free to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. As always, take care and happy summoning. Bye.